The work is set to unveil yet more of the world-famous terracotta statues buried more than 2,000 years to guard the mausoleum of China's first emperor.
AI has just finished scanning the Terracotta Army, and the results shocked every expert who saw them.
Each face is individual, unique.
What was expected to be routine analysis instead revealed something so disturbing it could change history itself. The soldiers no longer look like silent guardians of the past. They now stand as a warning, pointing to secrets buried with China's first emperor that were never meant to be uncovered. And now, the question is not just what was built, but why. The accidental discovery that started it all. It was the spring of 1974 in the sun-baked farmland of Lintong District, just outside the ancient city of Xi'an in central China. A group of local farmers, desperate for water during a harsh drought, had begun digging a well. They were not expecting anything unusual. Their focus was simple: find water to save their parched crops. But as they dug deeper into the dry soil, their shovels suddenly struck something hard beneath the earth. At first, they thought it might be a buried rock or chunk of tree root. But as more pieces came loose, they realized these were fragments of something else entirely. The clay pieces they pulled up from the ground were not natural. Some were shaped like arms, others looked like torsos, and a few even resembled armor plates. One farmer found what appeared to be a face, life-sized, sculpted, and staring blankly through centuries of dirt. Shocked and confused, the farmers immediately stopped digging. Word spread quickly, and local officials were called in to examine the strange discovery. They too were puzzled. Within weeks, Chinese archaeologists arrived on the scene to investigate. As they began to excavate more carefully, it became clear that the clay fragments were part of something massive. Piece by piece, an ancient army began to emerge from the earth. Life-sized soldiers, horses, weapons, and even the remains of wooden chariots came into view. The realization sent waves of astonishment and disbelief through the team. This discovery would later come to be known as the Terracotta Army, one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in human history. This silent army had been buried for over 2,000 years. It was created to guard the tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. Born Yingzheng, he rose to power during the bloody chaos of the Warring States period when rival kingdoms fought endlessly for dominance. Through ruthless strategy, calculated deception, and sheer military force, he crushed every rival. His generals slaughtered hundreds of thousands of surrendered soldiers, burying them alive to strike fear into others. Alliances he signed were often broken the moment they served his purpose. Diplomats were used to spy, deceive, and spread lies that weakened enemies before his armies struck. When rebellion flared, entire cities were massacred, their people killed or enslaved. By 221 BCE, Yingzheng had unified China under his iron rule. At just 38 years old, he declared himself Shi Huangdi, the first emperor. This was more than a title. It was a claim of absolute power, a statement that he ruled all under heaven. To enforce this, he tore down the walls of conquered cities, imposed one script, one currency, and one system of weights and measures across the land. Those who resisted were executed without hesitation. He burned books that challenged his authority and, according to accounts, ordered scholars buried alive to silence dissent. His empire was built on fear, blood, and obedience. It was this same obsession with control in life and in death that drove him to construct the vast Terracotta Army, ensuring that even in the afterlife, his enemies would never stand against him. What the archaeologists discovered was beyond anything they could have imagined. Over 8,000 life-sized clay soldiers stood in battle formation, each with unique facial features, hairstyles, and expressions. No two figures were exactly the same. Some wore long tunics and held crossbows. Others carried bronze swords and stood at attention like guards ready for battle. Alongside the soldiers were more than 670 horses, 130 chariots, and even figures of acrobats, musicians, and high-ranking officials. The sheer scale and detail of the Terracotta Army stunned experts. It was as if time had paused, preserving a full military force underground for over 2 millennia. But even after 5 decades of digging, much remains unknown. Only a portion of the underground complex has been uncovered. The central tomb, believed to be the final resting place of Qin Shi Huang himself, remains sealed. Rumors and ancient texts speak of rivers of liquid mercury flowing through it, dangerous traps, and treasures beyond imagination. The fear of damaging what lies inside has kept archaeologists from opening the tomb. And so, in 2025, experts turned to a new tool to probe deeper without touching a thing: artificial intelligence. The 2025 breakthrough that no one saw coming. The breakthrough came when archaeologists joined forces with artificial intelligence experts and cutting-edge tech companies like Artec to study the Terracotta Army. The team used two powerful scanning techniques. The first was structured light scanning, where a projector shines a grid of light onto a surface. When this light hits bumps, cracks, or curves, it bends. Cameras record how the pattern changes, allowing the computer to build an incredibly detailed 3D model. The second was LIDAR, which works like radar, but with lasers. It sends out laser pulses that bounce off surfaces. By measuring how long it takes for the light to return, it maps the shape of objects, even those partially buried underground. With these tools, archaeologists could scan every statue in the Terracotta Army in ultra-high resolution. We're talking about measurements accurate down to a few micrometers. That's thinner than a human hair. For the first time, experts could study tiny scratches on armor plates, faint tool marks, even ancient fingerprints left in wet clay. But scanning was only step one. The real magic began when artificial intelligence took over. AI systems, powered by machine learning and deep neural networks, were trained to recognize patterns. These systems don't just store data, they learn from it. First, the AI was fed thousands of 3D models and visual records of the statues. Then it began comparing everything: facial expressions, body posture, hairstyles, armor styles, and even how the clay was applied. This analysis would have taken a human team hundreds of years. The AI did it in weeks. It spotted similarities, grouped figures into likely categories, and flagged inconsistencies that no human eye had noticed in 40 years of excavation. One of the biggest surprises came from a technique called hyperspectral imaging. Unlike normal cameras, hyperspectral scanners capture light across many more wavelengths, far beyond what our eyes can see. This allowed the AI to detect chemical traces of pigments that had long faded from the surface of the statues. To the naked eye, the warriors looked like dull gray stone, silent and lifeless. But under hyperspectral imaging, the illusion shattered. Ghostly traces of cinnabar red made from toxic mercury, malachite green from copper, azurite blue, and deep charcoal black appeared on the surface. AI mapping reassembled the pigments, creating models that revealed the army's original appearance. What emerged was not a row of clay statues, but soldiers that looked alarmingly human. Vivid faces, painted armor, and eyes that seemed ready to meet an enemy. The discovery unsettled the entire team. Some were shaken, even emotional, not because the colors were beautiful, but because the soldiers suddenly felt alive again. Ancient texts, like Sima Qian's Records of the Grand Historian, had described brilliant artwork inside the emperor's tomb, but most believed those details had been lost to time. Now, there was proof. The Grey Army was never meant to be stone-like or lifeless. It was once a full-color military force, designed to look as real and intimidating as the soldiers Qin Shi Huang had commanded in life. Standing in front of the reconstructed models, the team felt less like they were in an archaeological site, and more like they were facing the return of an ancient army that had been waiting underground for over 2,000 years. As the AI examined more and more figures, it noticed subtle but important differences. Some warriors had slightly different clay mixtures, showing that materials were desperately gathered wherever they could be found to keep up with demand. Others revealed variations in sculpting technique. Some were smooth and refined, while others were rough and crude. This reflected a workforce drawn from every corner of society. Skilled artisans pressed into service, peasants conscripted against their will, and prisoners forced to labor. Then came the fingerprints. AI scans revealed distinct impressions in the clay, different from one statue to the next. This meant individual workers had left their own human marks on the army, whether intentionally or by accident. They were proof that thousands of real hands had shaped this force. But history tells us many of these laborers never left alive. The fingerprints, then, are haunting signatures, the last traces of men whose lives were erased to create Qin Shi Huang's eternal army. What had once been seen as the world's most impressive funerary monument was beginning to look like something far more complex, and the AI was just getting started. Hidden chambers and a forgotten blueprint. To fully understand what's hidden inside the Terracotta Army, the team employed two cutting-edge tools: ground-penetrating radar, GPR, and magnetometry. These tools don't dig into the ground. Instead, they use energy waves to see what's hidden beneath the surface, kind of like how ultrasound works on the human body. Magnetometry measures tiny changes in the Earth's magnetic field caused by underground objects. These scans were run over large areas of land, including parts of the site that had never been excavated. Then, the mountains of raw data were handed over to an AI system designed to recognize patterns that human eyes might miss. When the results came back, the team was stunned. Beneath Pit 2, an area known to contain terracotta cavalry units and war chariots, the scans revealed something unexpected. There weren't just random underground lumps or natural sinkholes. The shapes were too organized. The AI pointed out clear, intentional structures: straight corridors, rectangular chambers, and enclosed rooms. These were not the result of soil collapse or erosion. They had been built, carefully and deliberately. Even more shocking, some of these hidden passageways stretched far beyond the officially mapped sections of the site. The underground layout did not match any known burial design from that time period. It looked military, like a command base. That realization hit hard. Historians have long known about ancient writings that described Emperor Qin Shi Huang's tomb as a miniature version of his empire. The texts claimed it had everything: palaces, government offices, maps of the stars, and even rivers of mercury flowing through it to represent China's mighty waterways. But this was something different. What the AI found hinted that the Terracotta Army wasn't just meant to look impressive. It might have been designed as a life-sized map of the Emperor's actual military system, his real-world army, recreated in clay. That theory gained even more strength when the AI made its next discovery. For decades, archaeologists had noticed small markings on some of the terracotta soldiers, tiny etchings on feet, torsos, or armor. Most experts assumed these were just workshop labels, like mold numbers or quality checks. But the AI, using advanced pattern recognition software, analyzed thousands of these markings and made a breakthrough. They weren't random codes. They were early forms of Chinese writing, some so ancient that they barely resembled the characters used today. The AI translated them and found an entire hidden language beneath the surface. Some inscriptions listed military ranks, others named specific units or battalions. Some looked like production orders, giving instructions for how to build certain types of soldiers or equipment. A few even seemed to include the names of the artisans who created them. But then things got unsettling. The AI kept finding references to soldier groups that archaeologists had never seen. There were labels for entire units that didn't match any of the figures already discovered in the pits. That meant they were still out there, unexcavated, undocumented, possibly buried even deeper underground. Some experts felt a chill when they realized what this meant. If the data was right, hundreds, maybe thousands, of terracotta soldiers were still buried, silently waiting to be found. They had been forgotten by history, lying hidden in complete darkness for over 2,000 years. Researchers were shaken, wondering what else they had missed. How deep did this hidden world go, and why had no one found it before? The AI continued digging deeper, and as more details began to surface, the picture grew even darker. Disturbing clues of human sacrifice and real warfare. Ancient texts, including the Shiji, recount disturbing accounts of Qin Shi Huang's craftsmen being entombed alive to protect the tomb's secrets and human sacrifices being made to serve the emperor in death. But for over 2,000 years, no one could prove these claims. The team used cutting-edge technology to re-examine the emperor's vast burial site. They didn't just rely on digging. They used AI-powered ground scans, machines that could see beneath the surface without disturbing the soil. These scanners looked for anything unusual: changes in soil density, odd mineral patterns, or traces of decayed organic material. And then, something strange appeared. In several places directly beneath or right next to the terracotta soldiers, the AI detected anomalies, irregular shapes that didn't match the layout of the warriors. There are unverified claims that the team zeroed in on these locations and carefully excavated. What they found was chilling. Bones, human bones. Some were young adults, possibly in their 20s. The bones weren't neatly buried. They were scattered, twisted, and broken. Some had clear signs of post-mortem trauma: cracked skulls, snapped ribs, and fractures that suggested these people had been thrown, crushed, or buried alive. The team used cutting-edge technology to re-examine the emperor's vast burial site. They combined ground-penetrating radar, GPR, magnetic surveys, and AI-driven pattern recognition. These tools allowed them to see beneath the surface without disturbing the soil. The AI searched for anomalies by comparing millions of data points, differences in soil density, magnetic signals, unusual mineral traces, and even pockets where organic material might once have decayed. Then, something unexpected appeared. In several locations, directly beneath or beside the terracotta soldiers, the AI flagged irregular shapes that didn't match the known layout of the warriors. These anomalies stood out sharply from the surrounding soil, as if something else had been buried there. Accounts vary on what happened next. Some reports claim the team targeted those areas and carefully excavated. What they found, if true, was chilling. Human bones. Some belonged to young adults, possibly in their 20s. The remains weren't placed with care. They were scattered, twisted, and broken. Several skulls were fractured. Ribs were snapped. Limbs bore signs of crushing, as though these people had been thrown into the earth or buried alive under collapsing soil. The team was shaken. Ancient Chinese texts had long whispered that workers and attendants were sacrificed to protect the emperor's tomb. Now, AI and excavation together seemed to confirm it. To go further, the researchers ran the bone data back through the AI, cross-referencing it with Qin-era tombs, burial records, and historical writings. The patterns were unmistakable. These remains aligned with ritual or forced human burials, the kind ordered by rulers to ensure loyalty and death, or to silence those who had seen too much. And the AI suggested there were more anomalies still waiting beneath the soil. Thousands of bronze weapons had been found among the Terracotta Army: swords, spears, halberds, and crossbow parts. For years, archaeologists assumed they were realistic-looking props buried to impress, not to be used. But AI analysis told a different story. Scientists used high-powered microscopes and digital imaging to examine every tiny detail of the weapons. What they found shocked even the most experienced experts. These weren't imitations. Many of the blades showed tiny nicks and scratches, clear signs of actual combat. Some had polish marks from repeated sharpening, proof they had once been used and maintained like real military gear. A few even carried traces of a chemical coating, chromium oxide, which prevents rust. This is a rust-proofing technique so advanced that it wasn't developed in the West until the 20th century. The implications were terrifying. The Terracotta Army was not armed with props, it was equipped with a real arsenal. Qin Shi Huang had stripped valuable, battle-ready weapons from the living and entombed them to serve him in death. That decision meant his ghost army was prepared to fight for him forever, while his people above ground were left weaker. It revealed that the emperor's obsession with control reached beyond life, demanding even the tools of war be buried with him. The advanced chromium coating added an even darker layer. It proved that the Qin possessed technology far ahead of its time that seemed to vanish after his death. This raised disturbing questions. What else did Qin's empire know, and what could still be hidden inside the unopened tomb? If the weapons were real, and the armor was real, then maybe the soldiers weren't just symbolic guardians. Maybe they were based on actual people. These could be real military units from Qin Shi Huang's legendary conquests. Perhaps each statue represented a living soldier who had fought in wars that unified China, like the brutal invasions of Chu and Qi. The idea stunned the researchers. The Terracotta Army might be a replica of the emperor's actual army, frozen in time, carrying weapons that had once drawn real blood and buried alongside people who may have paid the ultimate price to build it. Then came one final, mind-blowing twist. If the weapons were real and the warriors were modeled on actual units, who were the leaders? That's when AI flagged something buried deeper, someone who stood above the rest. The Lost General and the Chariot of War. Near the central axis of Pit 1, an area long thought to be fully excavated, something unexpected happened. AI ground scans picked up faint, irregular density patterns beneath a collapsed section of Earth. At first, the team dismissed it as noise. This part of the site had been studied for decades without surprises, but the signals persisted, and curiosity pushed them to dig. What they uncovered left the entire team stunned. From the soil emerged a figure unlike any of the thousands of warriors found before. He was taller by several inches, broader in the shoulders, and carried a presence unlike the others. His armor was more detailed, with chest plates and layered segments far more elaborate than the standard infantry. Most striking were the insignia carved on his belt buckle and the feathered crest molded onto his headgear. These are both symbols that, according to Qin military records, marked the rank of a general. The detail was so unusual that experts began asking whether this figure represented an actual person. Ancient texts spoke of Qin Shi Huang ordering his greatest commanders honored in his tomb, but no direct evidence had ever been found. The combination of his size, specialized armor, and the unmistakable insignia led scholars to one possibility: General Meng Tian. Meng Tian was more than a commander. He had been the emperor's most trusted general, charged with building massive stretches of the early Great Wall and leading brutal campaigns that secured Qin's northern frontiers. He was feared for his efficiency and ruthless tactics. The unique armor style on the statue bore close resemblance to descriptions of elite frontier troops under his command, while the crest was consistent with Meng's known rank. No other general of the time matched these details so closely. If correct, this was the first time a real historical figure had been identified within the Terracotta Army. But the revelation did not end with the general. Only a few feet away, buried in ruin, lay the remains of a chariot. At first, it looked like a worthless pile of fragments, collapsed under centuries of soil. But AI-powered reconstruction began digitally piecing the bronze fittings, wooden shards, and wheel remnants together. Slowly, an image appeared. This was no ceremonial vehicle. The axles bore stress fractures consistent with long use. The wheels carried dirt abrasion patterns that indicated real terrain wear. Even the bronze harness fittings showed scrape marks from repeated strain. This was a battlefield chariot, not a funerary prop. The implication was terrifying. Qin Shi Huang had not simply buried symbolic guardians. He had entombed lifelike representations of his real generals and even their war machines. This suggested a chilling intent. Qin expected to march into the afterlife with his army intact, fully armed, and led by the very men who had secured his empire in blood. But why would Qin go this far? Because he was obsessed with immortality. Historical records, especially from Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian, show that Qin Shi Huang grew increasingly paranoid in his final years. He sent envoys across the seas in search of the elixir of life, convinced that somewhere, a drink or potion could make him live forever. He feared assassination at every turn, forcing servants to taste his food and never sleeping in the same palace 2 nights in a row. His pursuit of immortality turned ugly. Desperate alchemists dosed him with concoctions made of mercury, believing it would preserve his body. Instead, it poisoned his mind, driving him erratic and cruel. He ordered thousands of laborers to dig massive underground tunnels and secret chambers, hoping to find mythical beings or gateways to eternal life. Many of those workers never returned. They were sealed inside to keep his secrets buried. Even darker are the rumors. One tells of him capturing groups of young men and women and sending them out to sea in fleets, claiming they were emissaries to the Islands of Immortals. None ever came back. Another rumor says that when alchemists failed to deliver eternal life, he had them executed and entombed, their bodies buried near his mausoleum as a warning to others who disappointed him. By the end of his life, Qin Shi Huang was no longer just a ruler. He was a man consumed by fear, willing to poison his own body, waste thousands of lives, and bury human beings alive, all in a frantic attempt to escape death itself. His Terracotta Army was only the final expression of this obsession, an empire rebuilt in clay, meant to serve him in eternity, no matter how many lives it cost. If this is what AI can uncover at one site in a single year, the question is, what will it reveal next and how prepared are we for what comes next? What do you think about these findings? Comment down below.